chocolate here.
I can't wait to hear about it.
You're in for a treat.
I can tell.
Seeing the paper-making story is really quite an exciting thing. Well, right now, Deb, we're in the pulp warehouse, and this is the beginning of the paper-making story for Kodak. Since Kodak doesn't own a forest or a pulp mill, we have to purchase all of our pulp. And as today, they're unloading the rail car and storing the pulp in the warehouse.
So how long does this supply last?
Well, typically we would have about 2 weeks supply for production here in the warehouse.
What happens next with these bales?
Well, John is going to bring these into the pulp warehouse, and he's going to arrange them by vendor. And there's a clear shot of the banding on the pulp there. And he'll take them over and store them in the pulp warehouse in the appropriate spot. And as you can see, it's stored around the warehouse. But this particular area right here is where we store it just before we come into the pulp opening area. And one of the interesting things to note is it's only 5 bales high. And at this point, this becomes a very usable height for us. And it's the height that we will put it on the dumpers. Note also the bands, the steel bands.
Right.
And we're going to be removing those bands shortly too.
Okay, so we just left the pulp warehouse. Where are we going next?
That's right. Well, Deb, we're going to enter the pulp opening area right now. And of course, this is also the area where we're going to beat the pulp into a slurry. So what's going to happen here, Deb, is these 20 bales of pulp are going to be lifted up by these dumpers and then dumped into about 18,000 gallons of water.
Wow.
Then this large agitator on the bottom of the hydropulper is going to rotate and catch these bales into a vortex and beat them into a slurry. It's really quite an awesome sight.
I can hardly wait. But tell me, what's going on over here?
Well, what we're doing over here is removing the wires from the bales of pulp. Now, if you'll notice, the tipper has elevated the bales again, and the operator is going to pick up the bales of pulp, and he's going to bring them over to the hydropulper. So now we have a stack of pulp that's been dewired and is ready for the hydropulper. And once he fills both of those dumpers, then they will be dumped into the hydropulper. What will happen is the hydropulper will begin to fill with water, and we'll put about 18,000 gallons of water in the hydropulper. And once that water has come into the hydropulper, these gates will come down to protect anyone that may be walking by. And then the dumpers will lift, the cover will lift up, and then the bales will be dumped right into the water for a big splashdown.
It sounds exciting. Let's go up and see.
All right, let's go.
Wow.
You can see the bales falling into the water now.
That's fantastic.
It's quite a splashdown.
It sure is.
So there you have it.
Wow.
Every one of those bales is about 500 pounds.
Now, how does it get broken up into little bits?
Well, once the agitator comes on, those bales will get caught up into a vortex and be broken up and mixed with the water to become a slurry, much like a milkshake. Here comes the vortex. Look at the power in that.
It looks like Niagara Falls.
Yeah. That motor is so powerful, it's rising the vortex right along the side of the chest. And of course, as these bales of pulp make it around the vortex, some of them collapse, go into the center and hit the agitator and are torn and ripped apart. And eventually, they'll be ripped apart into a slurry.
Where does the water go from this point?
Well, from here, after this is all done, this stock will be pumped over to a holding chest. But notice this yellow color on the top here?
I see it.
That is the brightener that's being added. And as you can see, it's getting a good mixing. By the time this is done, that'll be thoroughly mixed. Now the lid will close, and we'll continue to beat this for another 10 minutes.
That was amazing.
Well, I told you you were in for a treat. It's a very awesome sight. But you know, Deb, the paper making process doesn't stop there. Let's go take a look at the next link in the process, and that is the stock chest area. Come on.
Okay, sounds great.
chest that that fiber is going to come to. Now this one happens to be the number 2 hardwood chest. Notice how those 500-pound bales have been beat up into such a nice slurry. I'm going to grab a sample so you can take a look at it.
It looks like mashed potatoes.
Yeah, it's about the consistency of mashed potatoes. Notice how fine.
Oh my gosh.
And notice how much water is in there too.
A lot of water.
Remember I told you we put about 18,000 gallons of water in the hydropulper.
I remember.
And we mix this pulp in with it, and this is what it feels like. There's quite a bit of water in there, isn't there?
And it's very warm. Yeah, lots of water.
It's really amazing how much water is in here.
How deep is this?
Well, we have a chest right next to this one that's empty. Let's go take a look at it to get a little perspective.
Okay, great.
Now, Deb, this chest right here is exactly the same size as the last chest we were looking at.
Wow.
So it gives you an idea how much stock is really in that other chest. I'd estimate this is between 15 and 20 feet deep.
Now, how fast do the blades go?
That agitator moves about 30 RPM, and that keeps the stock suspended in the water, which is very critical for the process. After the stock is held here, it's blended with some of the other fibers and then pumped up to the refining room for be further refined in the refining room. So let's go take a look at that process.
All right, great.
So Deb, after the fibers are blended in the stock chest area, they're set up here for refining. Right here at the double disc refiner, this is the first stage of refining. This double disc refiner has 4 plates in it, just like those 4 plates on that pallet. The stock is going to be squeezed in between these rotating plates, and the plates are going to bruise the fiber, they're going to brush it, and they're going to open it up and increase the surface area for bonding, both for mechanical bonds as well as chemical bonds. From here, we're going to go to the second stage of refining where we're actually going to reduce the fiber length. Let's go take a look at that. Right over here, Deb, is a Jordan refiner. And this is the second step in that refining process that I was telling you about. What we're going to do to the fiber here is just cut it in half. So we're going to reduce the length of the fiber by about half. Now the fiber comes in that back pipe, and it has to go up this cone, uphill. The cone has steel bars in it. There are also steel bars in the shell. When the stock is forced between these 2 steel bars, and it's literally cut like a pair of scissors. And that's what cuts the fiber. When it exits, it comes through this pipe over to the stuff chest where it blends with other fibers. After that, it's clean. So let's go take a look at the cleaners. So Deb, after the refining process, we're going to do further fiber blending with Cooch broken recovered fiber, and then we're going to pump the pulp over to the cleaners.
Now, what exactly are you trying to eliminate in the cleaning process?
Well, we're looking to eliminate any kind of contamination, like dirt, lightweight plastics, cork, wood chips. You know, when we transport the fiber here in a rail car or even in a truck trailer, you have a tendency to pick up some dust and dirt, maybe some wood chips. And when you move the fiber in the warehouse or in the pulp opening area, sometimes you pick up dirt from the floor.
Right.
So it's important that we clean the fiber. So what we do is we have these cones that will clean the fiber. The stock enters the cone here, and it goes around in a circle and creates a vortex, much like a tornado. So the heavyweight materials, heavyweight, high-density materials, fall to the bottom.
All right.
They come out this bottom tube here, and they're called rejects. That will be rejected. The good paper, or the clean paper, is accepted to the top of the cone because it's lighter, it rises to the top. Okay. And that's the paper, that's the pulp that's going to go to the paper machine and become photographic paper. The lightweight rejects like cork or lightweight plastics, they're going to exit through the very top or the tube at the top. Also, it's an outlet for entrained air.
Okay. How many cleaners do you have in total?
Well, this happens to be the primary bank right here, but there are 5 different cleaner banks that are doing almost the same thing as the primary bank. And then the 6th stage cleans only the lightweight rejects, like the cork or the plastic things that float on water. Now in the 5th stage, where we do reject a small amount of fiber, that small amount of fiber gets sent to King's Landing, which is our recovery area, and that fiber actually acts like a filter on their screens, which serves as a secondary purpose for them. So it's very beneficial.
Yes.
Now, after the cleaning process, we're going to further de-aerate the pulp,
Okay.
and then we're going to do some more screening, and finally pump the pulp up to the head box. The head box is nothing more than a hopper which will evenly distribute the fiber right onto the wire where we really begin to make paper.
Now this I gotta see.
You're in for a treat. Let's go take a look.
Okay.
Well, Deb, before we go right to the head box and see how paper is made in a production operation, I thought I would give you a little demonstration here in the wet lab so that you could kind of envision it ahead of time.
Great.
What I did earlier today, Deb, was I grabbed some sample out of our Jordan refiner, and then I brought it into the lab and I grabbed a known quantity, in this case 400 mils. I have a proportioner here filled with water, and I know what the volume here is and I know what the volume here is. What I'm going to do is mix that stock up in this water and then pass it through this screen.
And the purpose of the screen is to?
This screen represents the fabric or the wire on the machine. And this screen is much like a window screen. It's going to allow water to drain through but trap the fiber on top of it.
So what I'm about to see is like a mini paper demo.
Exactly. I'm going to show you in a small scale how paper is made. So here's my sample.
So what's the consistency of the sample at this point?
Well, it's supposed to be about 4.2% out of the refiner. So I'm going to take it and pour it into the proportioner. I'm going to turn my agitator on so that I can get a nice homogeneous mixture of the pulp and the water. I'm going to take my screen and I'm going to place it in the slowness tester. Close the lid. I'm going to add some water to the slowness tester.
And why are you adding more water?
I'm adding water to the tester because first of all I want to clean it out a little bit. I want the water to wet down the screen. And I also want to drop this level, the water level, down to 0 so that I always have the same starting point.
So consistency is important.
Consistency is important, and so is the amount of time that it takes for the sample to drain. Now I have a clock set up over here, and I've reset it to 0. The fiber is going to drain from 0 to 0, or from 1,000 to 0, and I'm going to measure how long that takes using that clock.
Okay.
Now all I need to do is grab a sample. So my proportioner has my pulp agitated.
And again, it's important to have the fiber suspended in water?
That's correct. Now because fiber has a tendency to settle out, I'm going to grab my first 2 samples off the bottom and I'm going to pour them back on the top just to recirculate it a little bit. And then the next one I take, I'm going to pour right into the slowness tester. So again, I have a known quantity. And I'm going to pour this right into the slowness tester, bring it up to 1,000 mils.
Very good.
Let it settle for about 3 seconds, and then turn the handle.
Wow, does that drain fast?
Notice how, that's right, it's draining very fast initially. Look at this water that's coming out. Notice how clear it is.
It is clear.
that tells me that all the fiber in there is being trapped on the screen, which is exactly what we want to do.
I can't wait to see this.
On the paper machine, this water here is all reused. It's almost down to 0, so I'm going to stop it right now. So it took 28.7 seconds to drain that. That'll also determine how long it takes to drain on the machine. Now I've used gravity to remove all that water, and it did a pretty good job.
It did.
But because the rest of the water that's in here is harder to remove, I'm going to use a little bit of vacuum. So we have some vacuum hooked up, and I'm going to vacuum the remaining water out, or as much as I can. And when that's done, I'm going to open the tester.
Well, look at that.
And there's a pad of paper right on the screen. And what I'm going to do is take this blotter paper, put it on top of the pad, and then snap it off. And there's our pad.
That's
no more
fantastic.
pad on the screen. See,
None.
it's not really magic, it's science.
That's right.
So now I just want to remember how many seconds it took me, so I'm going to say 28.7. Now I need to press this because I can't get the water out, any more water out with vacuum. So after the paper comes off of the wire, we need to press it because the sheet is still fairly wet. On the machine, we have 3 felted presses, and all we're going to do is mechanically squeeze the water out of the sheet into the felts. So these blotter papers will represent those felts. I'm going to put it into this junior press and just squeeze mechanically some water out of here.
And how many pounds of pressure?
Well, it looks like I've got about 80 psi on there right now, or 180, excuse me.
And why is this important to press?
It's important to press because I've mechanically removed the water from the paper. Now, when I mechanically remove the water from the paper, that causes the fibers to come into intimate contact with each other. It densifies the sheet and gives us a lot of physical properties that we're looking for in the final product. After we press it, I'm going to remove this sheet and put it on the hot plate. This hot plate is going to represent the dryer cans in the first and second dryer section. Now, as the water is removed from this sheet, it's going to vaporize because the water that's left in the sheet is harder to remove. It's been absorbed by the fibers, and we've already tried to remove it with gravity, we tried to remove it with vacuum, and we've tried to remove it with pressure. And now we're going to use heat to get the final amount. And if I take this clear glass and put it on there, you can see the moisture on there.
I do, I see it.
Which tells me that the moisture is being vaporized, and in the paper machine that moisture-laden air is just evacuated to the atmosphere. Once the sheet is dried, we're going to weigh it, much like we would at the end of the machine. Make sure that we have the proper weight.
Okay. And this would be the measurer?
This is a balance here, and I'm just going to measure the weight in grams.
And the number is?
Well, it weighs 1.3 grams. But in this case, if our sheet of paper at the end of the machine was too heavy, we would adjust the valves and the pumps back on this end of the machine to get it into the right weight. So that's it. That's how the paper is made. Why don't you keep that as a memento of the mill, and we'll go out and look at the head box and see how it happens in the real world.
So what I understand from you, Pat, is it's important. I've seen how the paper is formed on the sheet, and then also how pressing and drying is important to the process.
Very much so, yes.
Okay.
Let's go see how it happens on the machine.
All right, great.
Come on.
Wow, Pat, I can't believe this. It's warm, it's noisy, and what are all these pipes about?
Yeah, a paper mill is typically very warm, and these pipes, well, there's a lot of subsystems that support the paper making process. It's much more complicated than, you know, the average person realizes. Well, Deb, we finally arrived at the much anticipated head box.
This is great.
This is that giant hopper I was telling you about that's going to lay down an even application of pulp and water on the wire. There's about 5,500 gallons a minute coming out of the head box. Of that flow, only about 1% of it is fiber, and 99% is water.
That's amazing.
What a lot of people don't have an appreciation for is how little fiber there really is in that. It's only about 1% consistency, or 1% of those 5,000 gallons is fiber. What I did is grab a sample here earlier, and if you put your hand in there, this
Wow.
sample came right from the head box. And as you can see, there's a lot of water and very little fiber.
A lot of water.
Do you notice anything different about it?
Oh, I do. Before it was like mashed potatoes.
Right, it looked like mashed potatoes. The fibers looked bigger. Here they've been processed, mashed, and cut the length, and very uniform, because we want a very uniform sheet of paper.
Right.
Notice also all the water that's draining off the foil units. That's all happening by gravity, just like it happened in the lab. Remember when I ran the sample through the screen?
I remember that, yes.
All that water is draining through the wire. It's being collected and reused.
Where does it recycle to?
Well, remember the hydropulper that I showed you earlier?
Yes.
Most of it goes right back to the hydropulper to make up a new batch of fiber. Let's go up on the observation deck so we can get a bird's eye view.
This machine is so big. It's humongous.
So anyway, Deb, what we have here is the head box. And you can see the slurry coming out of the head box being deposited on the wire. Again, it's about 5,000 gallons a minute. And look at how all the water is draining out under the wire. That's all by gravity at this point. And of those 5,000 gallons, again, only 1% is fiber. That fiber is starting to form on top of the wire. Now, if you look at the beginning of the wire here, you can see that it looks like there's a lot of water on top of the wire.
It does.
And that's because there is a lot of it, and there's a lot of drainage going on. As you move down the table, the foils are set up in such a way that they cause the stock to vibrate. About right here, we start to get into some micro turbulence, and more water is drained again. After that, the pad has formed so thick that the water just can't drain anymore by gravity, and it just starts to stay on top. So the sheet turns glossy again. Notice how the water sits on top of the pad just before it goes under the dandy roll. So under the dandy roll it goes, and then after the dandy roll, there's 4 flat boxes which are going to apply vacuum and draw off the rest of that water. So at the head box, we were 1% consistency. At the Cooch roll, 75% consistency. We've removed a tremendous amount of water. And
how fast is the table going? What's the speed?
well, today the table is running about 1,100 feet a minute.
Wow.
Well, Deb, at the end of the table here, the paper is peeled off and then brought into the presses for that mechanical squeeze.
Right?
So let's go take a look at where this paper is being peeled off the wire.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay?
Yes.
Let's go.
All right.
So Deb, here we are at the end of the table, and you can see the paper being peeled off the wire.
Yes.
It's being pulled off the wire and into the first press. Now the unique thing about the first press is that it has a felt on the top and the bottom. This is where we're mechanically squeezing the water out of the paper.
So this is like the blotter paper that I saw in the wet lab demo.
Exactly. We're mechanically squeezing the water out once we peel the paper off the wire.
Got it.
What I'd like to point out to you is that the paper is still very wet here. So I'd like to get a sample for you just so you can see what that's like. Okay? Now remember,
Wow.
the consistency of the fiber was 1% in the head box, and now it's about 25%. So it's still very wet.
And very fragile.
And in fact, if you were to squeeze it, you would see that you can get water out of it. There you go.
Wow. And
So it's still very wet.
Very
It can
wet.
be broken quite easily. Now as we press it and remove more water, it'll become stronger. This is known to paper makers as couch rope. The nice thing about it is it's completely recyclable. So I'm going to recycle it in the couch pit. Hold on. Okay, let's go take a look at the press section.
okay, let's do it.
So Deb, from here, you get a pretty good look at the second press and the third press.
Right.
You can see the paper leaving the second press,
I do.
entering the third, coming out of the third and going into the fourth press.
I see it.
Now the fourth press is unfelted, it's just a smoothing press, and from there the sheet will head into the first dryer section. But there's a lot going on in the press section, and it's not to be underestimated. What we're doing is just mechanically squeezing the water out of the sheet. But when we remove that water, the fibers are forced to come in closer contact with each other. And we create a denser sheet, stronger sheet, a stiffer sheet, a more uniform sheet. So the sheet is now about 50% fiber and 50% water. But the rest of the water is going to be harder to remove because it's inbound. It's been absorbed by the fiber. So we're going to have to use heat in the form of steam to evaporate the water. That's going to be done in the next dryer sections. So let's go take a look at that. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right, let's go. So Deb, the paper's entering the first dryer section now. It's about 50% moisture, and we're going to try to dry it down to somewhere around 1.2%.
Okay.
Sometimes you might see a cloud of steam over 319, but really, at this point, it's nothing more than moisture-laden air.
Pat, at this point, how many dryer cans are in this section?
Deb, there are 23 dryer cans in the first dryer section. And then in the second section, there's another 10 cans. What we're going to do is drive this paper moisture down to a 1.2%.
1.2%.
Then when we get to the size press, because the paper is so dry, we're going to add some more water.
No, that just doesn't make sense. Now, why would you add more water when you've taken such trouble to take it out?
Well, when we remove the water, it helps us control the moisture profile. And we also want to add some chemicals that'll help fortify the sheet and give us some properties further into the photographic process that'll help us later on. Up here I have a slant size press, and you can see there are two rolls, almost look like they're on a 45-degree angle. Where those two rolls come together, they create a nip. And we're going to put a puddle of water and size and other chemicals in that nip. And the sheet is going to pass through it and be sized on both sides of the paper. So both sides of the paper are going to absorb the water and the other chemicals like starch. When the paper exits the size press, it's going to be about 32% moisture. Now we came in at about 1.2%, and we're going to exit at about 30%. Now I know that sounds really high, but the good news is that water is primarily on the surface and a lot easier to remove.
Now, what about sizing? What does that do for the paper at this point?
Well, obviously the paper is very dry, and the size will be absorbed into the paper. It fills up a lot of the holes in the paper. It makes it impervious to air. It makes it a little stiffer and stronger, and it helps it prevent or it helps it to resist other chemistry that it will come in contact later on.
Okay.
Now the paper is going to wrap around this can, and because it's about 32% moisture, we have to dry it back down to about 9 to 10%. And because the water is primarily on the surface, it's a lot easier to do that. Hence, this dryer section is a lot shorter. When it comes out of this dryer section, it's going to be about 9 or 10%, and then we're going to take it into a calendar stack where we're really going to smooth it out. Let's go take a look at that.
Okay.
Okay, Deb, so the calendar stack is best viewed from over here. And I think if you look at the calendar stack here, you can see that the paper is being squeezed between these steel rolls. We're applying pressure and heat to the paper to try to smooth it out.
So it's like equivalent to the iron you use at home to press your clothes.
Yeah, right. That's a good analogy. We're trying to smooth out the paper, and we're also trying to control the caliper, or the thickness of the paper. And we want a uniform thickness from the front side to the back side of the sheet, as well as in the machine direction. That's what the calendar stack is doing for us. After the paper comes out of the calendar stack, it's going to go into a defect scanner. This defect scanner is going to use transmitted light as well as reflected light to look at any defects that might have inadvertently got into the paper. Now, you remember the cleaners that I showed you early on in the process.
Right, I remember.
Now, they remove a lot of defects that might have got into the pulp. But the paper has to travel down the table and through the dryer sections, and it might pick up some extra dust or oil somewhere. If it did, this scanner would see it. If it does see it, it records it in the computer, and it can also take a grayscale image of that, like a black and white photograph. Let us know what's happening there. The next place the paper goes is in this quality scanner. This scanner is going to measure the weight and the moisture of the paper, as well as check the caliper. Now, the really nice thing about this quality scanner is, Deb, do you remember when we were in the lab and I made that little round piece of paper?
I remember that
and we put it on the balance and we measured the weight of it? Well, this scanner is measuring the weight of the sheet as it traverses over it. If the scanner detects that the paper is too heavy, it'll send a signal to the computer, and the computer will make an adjustment down the machine on the wet end to lower the weight of the sheet.
So this end talks to that other end.
That's right.
Wow.
It's closed loop control.
Closed loop.
Now, it's also measuring the moisture. So if the sheet gets too dry, it'll turn back some of the steam. If it gets too wet, it'll ask the first and second dryer sections to put on more steam to try and control it. It's called closed loop control.
It's pretty amazing.
Today, we're making paper, we're putting about 60,000 feet of paper on one spool. So let's go see what a big spool looks like. Say 11 miles of paper on a spool looks like.
This I have to see.
Yeah, about right here. And take a look at the real spool. We have a nice vantage point. There's about 50,000 feet of paper on the spool right now. And when it gets up to about 60, they'll turn up a new spool.
Pat, you said this is a continuous operation. So how do you go from a full spool to a new spool?
Well, you're right. This is a continuous operation, and so we have to do it on the fly. When this spool reaches the maximum amount of footage that we want on it, we're going to bring this small spool, see the smaller spool up there?
I see it.
We're going to drop that onto the chrome drum and start to bring it up to speed. When it starts to come up to speed, there's an arm, that metal arm there, we call it a goose arm, that's going to swing over in front of the spool. That means that we're ready to turn up. Then what will happen is this neck will drop into position here very shortly. There it goes. Listen for the compressed air. There it goes.
There it is.
And here it comes. It's just that easy.
That's quick.
Now the gooseneck moves out of position. The large spool will be kicked out. And the new spool will drop down into position. At this point, our operators will come over and get ready to take samples off the spool. They'll grab some hand rolls off the outside, as well as a strip for testing. They'll look at them in the lab for formation and surface, and any other surface defects that might show up. The crane, I believe, is rated for about 22 ton, and it's lifting this spool up. It's going to take it over to the winder. Once that spool is put in place, they'll thread up the winder, unwind that spool. The winder will cut this roll into about 20,000 foot lengths, and depending on what width the customer wants, they'll cut that width. It could be 43 inches wide, it could be 86 inches wide. Wind it onto a core, kick the cores out of the winder, and then send the rolls next door for further processing.
Hey, that's pretty slick. Look how this turns in the other direction.
Yeah, that's pretty neat the way the turntable picks up those two rolls and then turns 90 degrees to send the paper on to the next operation.
Where does it go from here?
Well, from here, a driverless vehicle next door will pick these rolls up and bring them over to a wrapping station where they'll be wrapped and stored until they're needed for coating. Now, Deb, unfortunately, that ends our tour.
Oh.
And I hope that you've seen a lot of interesting things, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
The tour has been fantastic. It's really a miracle.
Well, we saw a lot of things happen. We saw paper being made from pulp, all the way down the paper machine to the winder being slitted, slit, and then finally transported to the next operation.
It's very exciting.
It's very different.
Very different. So thank you, Pat, for a great tour.
You're welcome. Hope you enjoyed it.
I appreciate it.
Hello, my name is Al Vespucci. I'm the maintenance supervisor here in the paper mill. To reflect on the years here in the paper mill, you have to talk about the people. It is all about the people. They made it successful. It has impressed upon me how much teamwork and sense of community they have brought together. Working across different boundaries between production, maintenance, and engineering has been a real team effort, and the quality product that we have put out is evident of that. I'm just grateful that the opportunity to work among these people has afforded the opportunity for me to be here and lead this team in a very successful endeavor. As this community disperses and goes in different directions, I really look forward to keeping connected with many of the members, and I wish you good luck, and please keep in touch. Thanks.
Hey everybody, my name is Dennis. I'm a machine tender here in 319. We're in our final days. I just want to say, I want to take my hat off to all you guys that have been here with me for 26 years. I take my hat off to you for all the blood, all the sweat, and all the tears we've shared together. It's been great. It's been fun. And I'll miss you all dearly. See ya.
Hi, I'm Roger Beal. I've been here at 319 for the last 5 years. I'd like to say thanks to Crew 3. I've been with them most of the time. Everybody within the building has been a lot of fun to work with. I got to say to Dennis, I thought maybe on my last day that I retired, I could come down and work with you to push the button one more time and say, we're starting up, but I guess we're shutting down, I just want to let everybody know if you ever need a wedding done, I have horse and carriage service, and be glad to help anybody out. See ya.
Well, what I wanted to share is if you ask the people in 319 what they do for a living, how much of the person they're going to tell you they're paper makers. Then they're going to tell you they work at Kodak. If I bring new people into the mill, I tell them if you don't learn something new every day, you're not looking very hard. I think it's that balance between the heavy equipment and trying to keep a fragile paper web on the machine that keeps the job exciting for people. But, you know, that's true in any paper mill anywhere in the world. What makes 319 really special is the relationships that people have built, in some cases, in 20 to 30 years. And that's what makes this decision to shut down the mill such a regrettable one, is that sure, people are going to really miss the paper making experience, but more than anything, they're going to miss the Building 319 family.
My name is John Fitzgerald, Operations Supervisor in Building 319. I just want to take an opportunity to thank all the folks at 319. I've only been here for 1 year, probably the shortest amount of time than most people. but it's been a true pleasure to work with everyone here. The skill level of the operations and staff in Building 319 is something that I wasn't accustomed to, and in a very short period of time, I've grown to really enjoy working with. So again, just wanted to thank everyone for all their hard work, for working safe every day in and day out, and producing high quality paper right to the end. So thank you.
Hi, my name's Tim Thornton. I've been here for 24 years. This place has been kind of like a second home to me, and the people here have been kind of like a surrogate family. And it's going to kind of be tough to watch the demise of a great facility, but nothing lasts forever, and it's time to move on. So when you watch this in the future, think of me, and I hope you're all doing fine. Thanks.
Hi. My name is Deon Barnes. I've worked in the paper mill for 27 years. I'm a group leader on Crew 4. Had some great times here. I'm going to miss the people most of all. I've had a lot of friendships, and I will continue to have friendships after we shut down. But it's been a big party for me. I'm normally the party guy. Of course, I'm the best group leader too. Don't say that too loud, but you know, it's me. And this has been a very good experience. I'm looking forward to my next job, whatever that might be, but I'll give it 100% like I give the job I'm doing here 100%. And I wish everybody luck and in the future, and I will always be in touch with everyone. And last but not least, the food is here.
Hi, I'm Rob Emmerich. I've been with Kodak for 13 years. I've been in the paper mill for about 3 now. I'm the youngest and most least experienced person in the building, and I thought this would be a place that I could finish my career and build my skills for the rest of my life. But business conditions have changed, and Kodak's decided to close us down, and so my career will be going elsewhere. Exactly where, I don't know. The future is uncertain but exciting, and I'm going to really miss the people I've worked with here and the experience that I've gained. It's been a rewarding experience, and I'm sad to see it go.
Hi, I'm Patty Wiesner. I'm an instrument mechanic in the second floor shop. I work along with electricians and the shift mechanics. I've been here since the end of '93, and we work in a very diverse amount of equipment, from the wet end to the dry end to the chem makeup area. Everybody here is great to work with. We look out for each other, and we're almost like a family in our maintenance group here. And we've really enjoyed everything. It's been a real lot of learning experience, and we got a lot of skills. We really enjoyed it here.
I've been working here in the paper mill for 20 years now. I just have one question. Can anybody please tell me where I can find a bucket of steam?